Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Lovely to be back. I think it's been a minute. It's been some time since I was last here to sit with you. I appreciate the opportunity. As my I have a bio and I feel like, oh, I need to edit that down. And the part where it says that I moved to Palm Desert recently, now make my home here, is very recent. In fact, my partner and I this morning, I was just trying to find a spot for the Zoom that didn't have storage boxes or semi-built things in the background. And we're fortunate to have a little altar nook here, but even that is on a one of those no drilling hangers, which is supposed to support the weight, but there's a minor worry that the things all fall off the wall. I hope that's not going to happen. That would be a terrible omen for a Dharma talk. But I'm gonna choose to trust. Um, After 20 years of living at a Zen center or at Yokoji, it's a very interesting time, a rich time to move down from the mountain. Although I've been involved in different groups, as it was mentioned, at Long Beach meditation and also Insight Community of the Desert. I know that both my colleagues from that organization, Ian Chalice and Mary Stankiewicz, I think have attended your Sangha fairly recently. So not completely moving out of some formal monastery and then just landing in the world and being shocked. I've had quite a lot of experience off the hill too, and I'm very interested in how do I bring the core of what I understand to be Zen practice into everyday life, into the everyday world. How can it be expressed in ordinary ways and ordinary language, and for it to be a seamless and effective support for everyday activity in the world that we live? That's the exploration and the experiment that I'm involved in. In the spring of what's coming up in 2026, I'm going to give my first Dharma transmission, which would be to basically authorize somebody to teach. This is the gentleman in question, a long time student of Maizumi Roshi, the founder of Yokoji, had basically finished, close to finishing study with Maizumi Roshi, and then has returned to study. And basically, I'm in the finishing off formal study process of this person. And this past week, I was showing him the transmission documents, which in Zen are these extraordinary documents that are given that are done on silk, a kind of silk paper, which are long and have the lineage chart and various empowerments. And these documents haven't changed much in about 800 or 1,000 years. And it's not the kind of thing that you open and just kind of get out casually. I probably only looked at them once or twice in the last 10 years. This time in looking at them, I was really drawn to see the pivotal figures of the lineage of Zen Buddhism, which in our tradition and in all Buddhist traditions, of course, begins with Siddhartha Gautama, Shakyamuni Buddha. the great Indian ascetic and spiritual teacher. I think everybody is familiar with the main points of the Buddha's story. From Shakyamuni Buddha, Zen starts to gain its character when the Indian teacher Bodhidharma makes the journey to China and arrives in China somewhere around 5th century, I think 5th century AD. Bodhidharma is the first one to really put the stamp on how Zen Buddhism is distinct in its understanding from perhaps other schools of Buddhism, because as I'm sure you well know, Buddhism is this really very broad teaching, and has a different cultural appearance wherever it has taken root around the world. Bodhidharma said that Zen could be described as an intimate teaching, right? Not dependent on words and letters, pointing directly at the mind and realizing Buddha. Realizing Buddha, saying right there that each one of us is capable of realizing the fact of awakening. In fact, when Shakyamuni Buddha is enlightened upon seeing the morning star, he says, I, all beings the great earth, have the wisdom and virtue of the awakened one to thusness. Or at least that's the later Mahayana translation of what he says. But that is, I, all beings, everything in the world, everything, all included, wakes up together. Otherwise, there's no enlightenment. So when Bodhidharma says, pointing directly at the mind and realizing Buddha, he attests to this, that this is what our practice is. Not dependent on words and letters, although words and letters help, books help, talks help, but the work of realization in meditation and Zen sitting can only be done by this one alone, and the realization takes place right here in this heart mind. From Bodhidharma, in these documents, you see passing through various teachers. We come to the sixth patriarch, we go on, and then to the Soto tradition, the tradition in which I'm practiced. The great teachers of early Chan Zen in the Tang Dynasty, Tozan, the lineage holder of the Soto school, his lineage would continue all the way down to Dogen. Dogen, the great 13th century Japanese monk, who's already a very accomplished practitioner and teacher, decides to take the dangerous sea voyage from Japan to China in order to find a teacher who could help him to push deeper and to have a deeper realization. You look back in the tradition of the lineage. Lineage is very important in Zen. So, we look back to the ancestors and we find people who were not satisfied with an accreditation or a certification, with just having the stamp. They really needed to understand deeply for themselves and to become liberated. Perhaps once every 100 years or something like that, a truly pivotal founder will come along. Dogen was one of these practitioners. He wrote a voluminous work, Shobo Genzo. He was certainly a deeply skilled and multi-talented person who could write very well, express very well, practiced very diligently, but perhaps most importantly, had a great depth of realization. And that is something that goes through the generations in Zen that's most valued. Can someone have true realization and then be able to actualize and express that. That's the challenge. That's a challenge for those of us who practice in this lineage. Of course, when I step out of the temple, I meet so many people with different lineages, come from different approaches, more religious approaches, more secular approaches, different lineages of Buddhism. And that weaves this wonderful tapestry where we can all support one another and learn from one another, which helps it not to become dogmatized or fit into some kind of narrow understanding. I wanted to bring up a section from a short section, but a very key section from Dogen's Genjo Koan, which is perhaps his greatest or regarded as his greatest work. Genjo Koan, you can, if you're not unfamiliar, you can find this online very easily. There's some good translations online. This one is from Kaz Tanahashi. Genjo Koan translates in English as actualizing the fundamental point. Actualizing the fundamental point. And it's a short work, but it's very beautiful and concise, talking about the practice of zazen, Zen sitting, and the realization and actualization that's found therein. So I'm going to read the section. To study the way of enlightenment is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. When actualized by myriad things, your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, drops away. No trace of enlightenment remains, and this no trace continues endlessly. When you first seek Dharma, you imagine you are far away from its environs. But at the moment when Dharma is authentically transmitted, you are immediately your original self. So quite a short paragraph, but really the whole of meditation practice and Dharma practice is contained herein. I would say that in Zen practice, in Zen Buddhism, the sitting, the just sitting style that Dogen talks on here is distinct from other meditation practices. And when we come to meditation, we usually learn some method, right? We have to learn some method. It's not enough to just be able to, sit down on a cushion or sit in a chair and then just, kind of, okay, I'm here. Here I am now. I'm just going to meditate, and soon I will be enlightened. We realize that when we sit, when we begin to sit, that the mind is often lost in confusion. The practice is opaque, and it takes some time to orient to what it is that we're doing. The usual techniques that are offered, like breath awareness techniques, are extraordinarily time honored. Even when the Buddha was in the world and practicing, it was said that there was something like 50 or 60 meditation traditions in the Ganges Valley at that time. Meditation had already been well established for centuries in that point in northern India. The Buddha, it said, late in his teaching career, was asked by Ananda what he did when he sat, when he meditated. And this is post-enlightenment, so to speak, post his big experience. And the Buddha said, I sit with awareness of breathing. That's very instructive. We might think that the Buddha would be working some kind of advanced practice, but he's sitting and focusing on breathing much later in life. That is a complete practice and meditation practice in itself. If we devote a certain amount of time, ideally each day, to still sitting with awareness of breathing, then our life will be supported by that practice. Just a wonderful salve and medicine for the human body mind is to sit quietly and just focus on the rising and falling of breath. Even that is enough. But in the Zen tradition, and particularly in Dogen's tradition, there is the moving beyond method in the approach, moving beyond method and transcendence of method, and now the exploration of just sitting. So he says here, he begins, to study the way of enlightenment is to study the self. So I'd say perhaps we're all, whether we frame it in that language or not, we're all involved in the study of enlightenment and the study of the self, the study of the way, to study the way, to study the Tao, to study this reality. When we come to meditation practice and Dharma practice, we're involved in the exploration and study of this extraordinary mystery that we call what we call this human experience. So vast in its depth, so complex, so broad. To study the way is to study the self. Study in the sense, that can make perhaps have a connotation that we're going to be learning things. If we say to study the way, often the typical default human approach is to study things dualistically. We have this as just the way that the human consciousness and our software understands the world. We navigate the world in a dualistic way. But in our practice, in Dharma practice, that can only reach so far. The deeper study is a study before dualism comes into the world. It is a study of the non-dual direct experience of our life. To study the way is to not create two things, not to have it be me doing something. When we sit, if we're doing something, that might be certainly creating some positive, having some positive effect and helping us. But if we look really what's going on there, when it's me, I sitting here experiencing things, then that's always partial. There's always some bias. There's often a preference. And it's not the direct study of the way or study of the self. When we sit in the Zen tradition, in the practice of just sitting, then the approach, a little different than other meditation techniques, is right from the beginning, as soon as we have settled down and the bell is struck, is the study of the self is a broad, all direction at once approach. A broad, all direction at once approach where we let go of the differences between the content of experience. Now, what do I mean by that? Like when we sit, we're experiencing certain things. We're experiencing the rising and falling of thought, right? That's often a very seductive one for us as practitioners because it's involved in that self-identity. So we have thought arising. We have the appearance of the other sensory perceptions, so perhaps sounds or silence, some movement, light, sight, all of this sensory experience is going in. And we have something of the appearance of an interior world and an exterior world. And we're sitting in that place, right? In Dogen's practice here that he's talking about, we We let go of the distinction between the interior world of self and the exterior world of appearances. So rather than me, I experiencing something, there's just the appearance of everything that's here. And there's no distinction made between my thinking and the sound on the street. Right? In fact, one could say a good way to approach in this way is to have no more regard for your thinking mind than you do the feeling in your knees of a contact with the ground. It's radically allowing all things to be as they are. And what we're dropping in this practice is the preference system and the value system around the content. The human beings, the Buddha, who was an extraordinary diagnosis of the human condition, he said that we are always involved in attachment and aversion. So we're clinging. As human beings, we cling. We attach to things. We attach to the content. We attach to experience. So there's attachment. We want the things that we like to persist. And then there's aversion. We want the things that we don't like to go away. And that's a natural part of being human, and that's continuous. And intrinsically, there's no problem. Relatively, it can cause us some problems. But to sit when we can allow what is happening in our interior space or what's perceived that way, and the exterior space or what's perceived there, if we can drop the preference and take a radical shift and declare a unilateral peace with this experience, this world as it is, then that is the active exploration and study of self. This is self with kind of maybe a capital S, not the study of the self, which is just me, my life, and the things that are happening in it, but the self, which is including all of the world, all of our experience. After all, when we gaze up at the stars at night, we see light years into the universe. That's all self. We're here in the car on the street. That's the self. Everything that we're experiencing has always been and only been experienced through these eyes, through these ears, as this one here. So the whole world in every direction is the self. To study the way is to study the self. He then says, to study the self is to forget the self. That might sound like a positive thing or a negative thing. In Zen or in Dharma practice, we take it as a very positive thing, in the sense of when we practice and become practiced in meditation, perhaps one of the first important shift that happens is we become aware of our own thoughts, we become aware of our breathing, and we're able to sit and be aware and just be the awareness, be that observing presence, right? Which I recently learned, I think is called a meta awareness. We can be in that place where we can just sit and watch and observe. This often takes some time to practice as a meditator. But when we arrive at that place of just being able to sit as the witnessing presence and observe self, observe the world, that is already just a very powerful shift that's been made. In Dogen's scheme here, to study the self is to forget the self, then we go deeper and further again. Rather than just being the one who sits and watches, we enter into our direct experience to the depth that the self is, there's no need to call it me, I, that's watching something. That sense between the one who perceives and that which is perceived drops off. Everybody experiences this in different ways in everyday life. You know, particularly it can be found when this kind of flow state, when we are doing something that you really love, something that you're just so intimate. As Bodhidharma said, Zen is an intimate teaching. When you're truly intimate with your environment or a task or something that you're involved in, and you pour yourself into it to so much that self and subject and object fall off, and there's just the flow of reality. There's just that flow of experience. When, ironically, forgetting the self is deeply liberating, right? Because for each of us with our human condition, um, the self is busy. The self is always involved in things, has worries, concerns, has a to-do list. I watch my own mind after 20 years of living at a Zen center and then moving, you know, to a new town and an apartment and the 10,000 things that need to be done. And, you know, I've got to get the internet and the electric. And oh my gosh, now we have to pay for a sewer. We didn't have to do that at the Zen center. You know, all of these things go on. The mind is always very busy. The self is busy and involved in attachment and aversion. So dropping off the self, being able to sit and let our concerns go, to transcend that gap between subject and object, and to really deeply surrender to the seat. Then we can forget the self. And now then we start to sit like the Buddha that's on that I can see here on the altar. Right? The wooden Buddha or a metal Buddha doesn't sit and is like concerned with the predicament of the self or causes and conditions. It just sits. But Siddhartha Gautama couldn't become enlightened. Right? Me, I doesn't get enlightened. Me, I is always the barrier to becoming awakened. It's when me, but rather when me, I, and my concerns and my worries, or that when that is allowed when that is dropped. But we don't have a switch that we can throw to drop the self. Dropping the self comes from immersion in presence, immersion in awareness. Each one of us has or is this awareness without exception. As the Buddha attested to, I, all beings, the great earth. We all are this awareness. Isn't that extraordinary that we all share the same common, mysterious root of being? Nobody knows what it is, where it comes from, right? But we all are it. We all are this awareness being expressed differently by everybody here, right? We can think, you know, if we look at ourselves as just like a lens for experience, where the awareness of the world is experiencing itself through us. Each one of us is a window in that way, or a light or a, you know, like a window in that way. When you can sit and just be a clear window, then the light of awareness shines through. It's not my awareness or your awareness, it's just awareness. He then says, to forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. When actualized by myriad things, your body and mind, as well as the body and mind of others, drops away. A little earlier in this text, Dogen says, gives us two sentences which really describe this approach to practice and awakening. He says, to carry the self forward and illuminate myriad things is upside down. That myriad things come forward and illuminate the self is right side up. Or another way to put that, to carry the self forward and illuminate things is delusion. That myriad things come forth and illuminate the self is awakening. This is the key shift or a key pivot. Right? To carry the self, to carry this one, me, forward experiencing things, that I could say that's our conventional human reality. It's me in the world, the things, going forward and meeting things. That's kind of conventional. But Dogen says here that there is something deeper afoot, right? That's happening kind of on the surface. We have this surface sense of navigating the world, me, I, going forward and doing things. But on a deeper level, myriad things come forth and illuminate the self is awakening. So what we're saying here is at the center, there isn't a me, I, separate from the world going forward in this dualistic relationship experiencing things. But that is something of, well, maybe an illusion. I think of it more as just that's our human consciousness. That's just the way we explore this reality. But intrinsically, when we go deeper, we see that the world is experiencing us. The things are actually the other way around. Rather than this one going forward here and experiencing things, that the things are coming forward and experiencing us. We can grasp the heart of that in our practice of meditation. When we sit all of the way down, and then when we radically allow everything to be as it is, without exception. I'd practiced for many years and finished a formal study in Zen, okay, and then I'm sitting in this just sitting practice, and I was finding it so difficult after having done koan study and different approaches. Just sitting, it's almost like a kind of, okay, is this it? Is this it? And then I heard a line from somebody giving a Dharma talk. I think it was back in the day when I was putting a CD on in the car. And I heard this line from somebody at a retreat, and he said, how about when we sit, you cease manipulating reality? How about when we sit, you cease to manipulate reality? In some curious way, that landed. Right? For each one of us, the words that land, the teachings that land, the shifts that happen, it's different. It's unique for everyone. But it struck me as, could this Dharma practice, could this sitting practice be so incredibly simple, so radically simple as to sit and cease manipulating reality? And as I began to explore that, I saw, wow, my manipulation of my reality runs so deep. Even when I sit, I'm usually want to tinker with the content somewhat. Was this a good meditation? Is this a bad meditation? Is the mind busy? Should I be more concentrated? How am I feeling? But to let all of that go, to just declare a unilateral peace with the way things are, inside and outside. Now, that is a very powerful way to approach our sitting practice. How about we accept the world, this one here, just as is, with no fault? Isn't that to deeply be at home as ourselves? When we sit and we sit authentically, he says here, when you first seek Dharma, you imagine you are far away from its environs. That rings true for me. When I first began Dharma practice, I thought, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I realized that I don't understand much and there's more to understand. I felt like I was far away from its environs. At the moment when Dharma is authentically transmitted, you are immediately your original self. Some centuries later, the great Rinzai teacher Hakuin would say, even those who sit just once will see all of their bad karma erased. And I read that and I thought, well, that's really, even those who sit just once will see all your bad karma is dropped. I thought, well, I've been sitting for years and I still feel like I've got some things to work out, right? But Dogen and Rinzai are saying, Dogen and Hakuin are saying the same thing here. Dogen says when Dharma is authentically transmitted, and Hakuin says even those who sit just once. But when he says that, he means an authentic, all in sit, an authentic, all in, fully surrendered, direct experience of things as they are. Then you see all karma dropped. There's no story, there's no narrative, there's nothing to do, there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to attain. Everything falls off, everything drops away. And then we can awaken deeply. Right? But rather than awakening to some shinier, uh, more polished version of the world, we awaken to who we are, where we are, and we see our life, this world, as it is. And that's when the work of the Bodhisattva, we see that there is so much to do, so much to take care of. We can boil all of Buddhism really down to its core principle, which is the Buddha saw that we suffer. There is dukkha. There is dissatisfactoriness. As human beings, we create a lot of unnecessary suffering and dukkha. That's very clear. We've learned nothing in 2,500 years since the Buddha. You look out into the world and you see the suffering of the world, right? That endless task. But the way of a Dharma practitioner, the way of awakening, is to see that suffering in our own heart, mind, and all around us, and to see that that comes from greed, anger, delusion, upside down view, deluded view. Right? But by becoming intimate with our environment, by becoming aligned to the way things are, then we find that we can respond effectively. We can respond effectively in our life to the people and the things that are around us. The actualization of awakening, seeing things as they are, and then bringing the appropriate response into being, into manifestation. And certainly I would say that in the time that I've taught, and I can't help but reflect at the time with the retreats and my time at Yokoji, meeting so many Dharma practitioners, hundreds and thousands of people. Those who I meet who have a regular practice of authentic sitting in whatever style, those who show up to practice, to sit, it really shines clear. It really shows. If you sit and sit well, you're oriented to sitting and how to sit, then that realization can't be stopped. It occurs. You become a present person. You become a person of awakening. And then that's what we transmit. I began just talking about the kind of Dharma transmission. Each one of us is transmitting Dharma. Each one of us is transmitting and expressing the Dharma. But through our practice, through our commitment to meditation, a commitment to the precepts, a commitment to these fine principles, then what we transmit can benefit those around us and can ultimately benefit the world. We never know how far those ripples can extend. But it's such a vital and important offering to make that contribution, to do the best that we possibly can with who we are. And how wonderful that to really realize who we already are not who to become, but who we already are in our essence as we are, that we are in the right time, the right place, and the right circumstance to help the world. I'd like to pause there, conscious of time. It's already time flies, and at least a little space for any question or comment about what I'm raising up.
Any questions in the room or online? When you were talking about A equals B and B equals C and C equals D, I think the third one you said was to study the self. Did you say is to beget the self?
Is to forget.
Forget.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you said beget, and I was totally stymied.
Oh, okay, good. I'm glad we
Okay,
glad
thank
we
you.
sorted that out. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
I wonder if people might agree around that in the experience, like almost the ironic experience when self is forgotten. That is like ironically a liberating realization. Yeah.
Um, I don't remember the exact words you used, but something about when you're seeing.
That's okay, go
Can
ahead.
you hear me? When you're seeing
Yeah.
the world through yourself, that's not enlightenment. But when the world is seeing you, then it is. Can you? I'm using your terminology very badly. Can you repeat
No,
what you?
no. Yeah, yeah, no, you have it. I mean, he puts it in kind of broad strokes there because the conventional view is the, that sense of self and how I might understand the world and the kind of the beliefs and ideas about people and things and the world. And we can see that because so many people are in a fixed view in that way, with competing views, opinions, and beliefs about the world, that is the cause of a lot of strife and suffering and inflexibility. Right? Whereas human beings, when they cling like very, very closely to definitions and ideas of what the world is and what where meaning is found. Right. So that me, I understands the world in that kind of knowledge base is very useful, but we tend to over rely on it. And when we have a fixed view of the world, it leaves us a little narrow. So his sense of here is it's not that the sense of I'm not saying me, I should be discarded. Now I don't know what my name is. It's all been forgotten, but rather me, I, that sense of self is much more transparent, right? So the world there's much more flexibility around that sense of self, around our ideas, opinions, beliefs about things. So it's like in Zen practice, it injects a very healthy not knowing and maybe, right? So we understand that like where we're landing, we have perspectives on things, ideas about things, opinions about things, but we understand that we don't confuse those for existential truth and certainty. There's
Yeah,
always,
well, I
yeah,
was taking that in kind of like what you just described, but also
yeah,
there are times, and they don't happen that very often, but there are times where it seems kind of like synchronicities happen in my life, or I encounter people where an unusual connection, um,
yeah,
or, or events just pop up that relevant to issues that I'm going through at that time. And I get the feeling at those moments that the world is sending me messages. That the
Yeah.
world is, you know, saying I'm in sync right now because I'm giving you these messages. I don't know whether.
Exactly. That's well put. You know, it's like if when, as a human being, when we're kind of just collapsed into our own narrative or a fixed narrative, but we don't listen to the world, we don't listen to or see the world, and we don't listen to people in the same way if we just get folded in and get kind of narrow about those things, right?
Yeah.
So meditation is right from the beginning is the practice of awakening. It's sit and be awake. Just look, you know, you see the Buddha sitting, okay, kind of sit like that. Sit and then receive the world.
Right.
Now, right, when we receive the world and receive awareness and it's shining through us like the world, it's kind of like the world notices. The world notices and says, "Oh, this one's awake. What can I use them for?"
Yeah,
And
I've experienced that, and
Mhm.
it's fascinating when it happens. And it is constant. I have a feeling that I don't know, this maybe it's got a little woo-woo, but that the world is constantly sending those messages and communication. But that, as you say, we're so involved with our distractions, we rarely
Right.
pick up.
I got to own it for myself. Sometimes I don't listen. I'm not listening.
And
I've
I
got
see
my
that
own,
with,
I've got my
yeah,
agenda, my rational agenda for why I'm doing it this way.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm not saying that, forget this, forget and put the self away in a drawer. It's just our practice is one of non-attachment and not clinging, right? But we're always like, as human beings, we're always clinging. So we're always kind of we're always getting stuck. Sitting helps to just um, dissolve that sticking, let that sticking and that clinging go. So we're just over and over, when we sit, particularly, we're returning to our original state, our original being, as simple and as direct as that. Let go of everything and just sit and return to the natural order of mind. That natural and original sense of being is always undisturbed, always awake, always present, always and full of possibility, right? The one that's constrained or feels limited is always bound up with that self-identity.
Or feel distracted too.
Yeah. But we need that self-identity. Hey, I have a self-identity, that's very important too. But both things are important. But when you sit, it's like when you sit, let it all drop and just be a Buddha, at least
Yeah.
for that 30 minutes. That's for everybody here. That's what we do when we gather and we sit. It's just like, okay, but I feel like it's my job to get myself to the seat. That's Jokai's job. My job is to show up on time and then to make effort to get where I'm going, to be there. Okay, now I've arrived at the seat and a kind person has struck the bell. What do I do now? Okay, I realized a long time ago that I am too intoxicated to run this thing when I sit. So now I hand the keys to the Buddha and I let the Buddha drive, right? Because there's nothing for me to do. When I sit, when the bell is struck, there's nothing to do. So might as well hand the keys in to the Buddha. And when I say the Buddha in that sense, I just mean like the fullness of this reality. Like in time of sitting, why not really put your load down, put everything down, forget it, drop everything, let it all go. There's nothing you need to hold in meditation. There's nothing that you can lose that you need. Everything that you lose in sitting is a positive. Just let it all go, let it all drop.
Okay. Thank you.
You'll still remember where you parked your car, Well, actually,
Maybe
I
I
know
will.
maybe sometimes that happens to me, to be honest. Yeah. Where did I park?
Any
So I,
questions?
I realize, I come in with maybe something a little heavy from Dogen here, like here's all of Zen practice in about 6 sentences, and it's a lot to throw down. But I know there's a lot of sincere practitioners here who show up to Sangha, who sit and practice, and have open ears and open hearts. So I just wanted to, yeah, put some things out there to maybe provoke a way to look, a way to look at Zazen in the Zen tradition. And I hope it's useful.
Thank you.
Now time for our dedication of merit. Jokai, do you have one, or would you like us to use our standard one?
Give me one moment. There's a dedication I'd like to share. We dedicate the merits of our practice to everyone gathered here, to our families, our community, and to all beings throughout the Dharma worlds. May the light of wisdom dispel darkness and awaken compassion. Let all karma be released and the natural mind bloom in eternal spring. May we see clearly into the nature of reality and live each moment with awareness. Let us awaken together and walk the way with love and humility. May all beings be happy and safe from harm. May all beings be healthy in body and mind. May all beings be peaceful and free from suffering.